Hey all, I want to read a little excerpt from the first Lee's Menagerie book. I've been working really hard to get the manuscript finished this summer. It's been a little bit crazy. As some of you know, we've had some setbacks and some financial stuff, but I have been pushing through, and I actually have the prologue, which is what I want to read for you guys today. And this is actually the very beginning of the first book in the Lee's Menagerie trilogy. So, all right, here we go. And this is all a little tentative, subject to change as the rest of the book kind of gets finished up. But, all right, Lee's Menagerie, The Lee's Menagerie, Book 1, Prologue, The House in the Woods. The house perched in the center of a sloping hill ringed by the wet woods. Its looming tower columns and lead-pane windows gave off the haughty air of wealth fallen to ruin. The paint of the intricate gingerbread facade, tracing the awnings in its delicate loops and curls, peeled with age. The once robin's egg blue walls faded to a dull gray. A layer of grime coated each window, obscuring the view of the furniture inside. Chase lounges and lion-footed clocks transformed into dusty ghosts and goblins under their off-white sheets. Many summers had come and gone without anyone to care for the sprawling lawn or surrounding gardens. Each spring the forest swallowed a little more of the yard. Even the once gleaming copper spires adorning the tower tops were tarnished with green speckles. Only their points remained visible above the boughs of the massive pine trees. A lazy summer wind tickled the low-hanging branches, making the trees groan. The wind danced through the yard and towards the front porch, rustling the leaves of the blackberry vines, ensnaring the wooden posts. This late in the summer, ripe purple berries twinkled among the thorns like jewels. The wind dipped now, blowing past the house and down the sheer cliffside, which gave way to a rocky, abandoned beach. The restless waves of the sea became liquid gold as the rays of the setting sun infiltrated their depths. Atop the hill's crest stood a woman dwarfed by the pines. The fading sunlight made her olive skin glow bright against the darkening woods. She was long and willowy, her chestnut hair falling loose to the middle of her back. She closed her almond eyes, inhaling the sharp scent of the coming twilight. Somewhere in the back of her mind rested memories of enchanted summer nights tinged with the scent of sea salt and magic. She raised her arms above her head, letting the mischievous breeze tickle her open palms. The fading light caught the edges of her silhouette just then. For a brief moment, she was a shining beacon at the edge of the world, a gatekeeper for some enchanted realm. An echoing crash exploded from the house behind her. She whirled around to face the noise. As the shadows rested on her features, the ethereal glow faded and was replaced by a petulant, all-too-human scowl. "So this is it, Lore," said a man, also dark-haired, his pale face a galaxy of freckles. He walked toward her from the front door of the house, which he had just slammed shut. He embraced the woman round the middle, hands coming to rest delicately over her abdomen. She covered his hands with her own, finding the smooth circle of his shiny gold wedding ring. He burrowed into the crook of her neck, prodding her with kisses. "Yeah," she sighed, looking back out onto the ocean, the waves now fading from gold to midnight blue. "It's just how I remember it, right down to the broken roof tiles," she murmured. Simultaneously, they glanced up at the vine-covered roof, which was indeed missing a shingle or two. The man took a few steps away from his wife to consider the house. He peered past the back lawn into the trees. No other man-made structures were visible from anywhere on the property. He had checked, at least twice. "The thing definitely needs some TLC. It won't be a small project, especially with the location." He furrowed his brow, causing deep lines to crisscross his face. This further accented the age difference between the two. While she had the energetic glow of a woman just entering her 20s, his thinning hair and worry lines hinted that he was at least a decade her senior. He chewed pensively on his bottom lip. The sun slipped lower in the sky, casting a pink tint over the ever-present clouds. "Why don't we take a little night walk, just like we used to on the bluffs back home?" Her tone was playful as she reached out to lace the fingers of his left hand through her own. He caught her by the wrist and held her there for a beat, scowling. "Seriously, Lore? Do you really think running around the woods at night is intelligent in your condition?" A pointed look at her still flat stomach punctuated his words. She rolled her eyes and laughed derisively. "Finn, I'm pregnant, not sick," she retorted. "Right, and if you catch your foot on a rock because it's dark and you didn't see it, then it'll be my fault for not stopping you," he spat back. She stuck her tongue out at him and turned to face the little dirt path that led away from the lawn into the domain of tall, shadowy trees. The rapidly fading light stretched and distorted the figures, creating an illusion of a second, darker forest within the branches. The full moon seemed to glow brighter. Laura paused to consider the trees. Seeing her hesitation, Finn spoke up. "See," he prodded, "it's already getting dark. Who knows what might be out there just waiting to pounce on us. Let's head back to the car, drive into town, and get some dinner, okay?" The slight edge to his words warned Laura not to test him tonight. "He's trying so hard," Laura's inner voice spoke unbidden. "Isn't that what you wanted, after all? For him to at least stick around and try?" She glanced over at the short man, hand stuffed into his jean pocket, rocking back and forth on his heels and avoiding her gaze. He could try a little harder, she thought stubbornly. Without a backward glance, she left the lawn behind for the shadow realm of the forest. Finn heaved a heavy sigh at her retreating back. With the demeanor of a weary guardian indulging a misbehaving child, he followed her into the trees. The first few minutes of the trail, neither person spoke. Laura led the way down the disused path with Finn a few strides behind. Only the sounds of the animals in the underbrush going about their evening routines accompanied the stroll. Eventually, Laura grew frustrated with the continuing silence. She began to chatter to no one in particular. "The woods are a bit different than I remember them. I mean, the trees always seem big, but my God, they're huge. And it's so green. I thought it must have been embellishment on my part, you know. I haven't been here since I was 11, but everything really is just so green." They came to a little stream cutting through the trail. "And wet," she mused, as they gingerly picked their way across the rocks, trying to keep the damp tennis shoes from getting damper. Once they reached the other side, she picked up the thread of her monologue as if she had never paused at all. "Actually, I can't even remember why I came to stay at my grandfather's that summer. Normally my mom wouldn't let me near the place." A wave of nostalgia rushed over her, and her voice stuck in her throat. "I know how the woods made me feel, though. Like magic was real and anything was possible. They still make me feel that way." She didn't mention the slight tinge of fear that colored those magical feelings. Finn said nothing, still resentful of Laura's stubbornness that evening. The last rays of sunlight were nearly gone, the forest bathed in the silver of the full moon. The sounds around them shifted from those of daytime creatures settling in for the night to the more peculiar noises of nighttime creatures emerging from their hideaways and nests. In the boughs of the trees above their heads, an owl called out with its low, droning voice. Laura's memories about that strange summer surged. She had orchestrated this whole trip up the west coast to coax her new husband into moving them into this sleepy house in this tiny town. The house from that one magical summer in her childhood that she had never stopped thinking about. Only now she couldn't recall why she had never stopped thinking about it. The more she prodded her memories, the less of them she could find about her grandfather's house in the woods. She recalled long, lazy afternoons searching for oysters on the rocking beach, laying on the green, manicured lawn staring up at stars, and flashes of the ocean, blue as aquamarine. In each burst of memory, she was alone. That couldn't be right. She had been a child. Where was her grandfather? Her mom? Hadn't they been there too? She couldn't recall. The harder she thought, the more the memories slipped away from her probing mind like so many wriggling fish. Her inability to focus on that summer, one which she had always believed to be the best of her young life, was beginning to make her nauseous. She didn't feel particularly concerned that the insects populating the woods on every warm summer night had stopped droning. So absorbed in her own mind was she that she even missed how the night birds no longer rummaged in the underbrush in search of worms. Except for the staccato sound of their own footsteps, the woods were now silent. Finn noticed first. "Laura?" His voice was low and hesitant as he closed the gap between them. "I think there's something out here." They stopped moving, the silence now so complete that they could hear the blood rushing in their ears, each trying unsuccessfully to stifle the sound of their breathing. Something large moved from between the trees and onto the path in front of them. "Behind me," Finn croaked, pulling her back, his face white as a sheet. From out of the dark path, a large figure was swaying towards him. The figure stood upright, taller than a man, and moved with a strange, sloshing gait, like a giant glass of water attempting to walk upright for the first time. As Finn and Laura took a step backward, the creature moved into a beam of moonlight. Rather than illuminating the figure, as the light hit the form, it seemed to be sucked into the swirling mass, darkening the center of the thing and sending shadowy tendrils snaking out of its body. As the creature shambled closer, Laura found herself unable to lift her feet. Her breathing came fast. She tried to will herself to run from the approaching monstrosity. When it was less than 2 meters away, she noticed its entire body was composed of these wisps of dark, putrid smoke, the kind of smoke you picture belching forth from the factories of the Industrial Revolution. The thick plumes curled and snaked together in a writhing, ever-changing mass. Though it seemed impossible, the cloud moved under its own power, closing the gap between itself and the couple in a matter of seconds. What is it? Laura wanted to ask, but she realized belatedly her body was rooted to the spot, her tongue unable to form words. Finn stood stock still in front of her, clearly under the same spell. The tall figure bent down, its swarming, eyeless face inches from Laura's own. A horrible smell rolled off the creature's skin. If Lorelei had been in control of her own body, she probably would have fainted from the intensity of it. It stank of rotted meat and grave soil. As the creature considered her, its dark, shadowy flesh pulsed as if maggots squirmed just below its surface. She wanted to be sick. With a slow, deliberate movement, the creature extended a tendril-like arm. Long, thin fingers grew out of the darkness before Laura's eyes. The creature flexed the new digits tentatively. Then it reached out past Finn, who remained still and glass-eyed, and pressed the appendages to Laura's forehead. As soon as the tendrils made contact with her skin, Laura felt the most intense pain of her life. Along with the pain came a sharp, bracing feeling, like a rush of ice water or a slap to the face. Forcefully, air entered her lungs, and she was in control of her body once more. She screamed. The pain screamed back. Voices filled her head as if bubbling from a deep well, the sounds muffled and distorted. They spoke no words she could discern, just an impassable wall of noise bearing down on her. There was anger, so much anger. Though she was wrapped in darkness, the sound around her was so heavy she could feel it against her skin, feel it vibrating in her bones, trying to shake her apart. And at the center of the tumult, sitting directly in the eye of the storm, Laura and the monster were still touching. In her altered state of reality, Laura felt as if they were the same entity. The pressure from the voices around them seemed crushing, weighing them down heavier with every passing second. As she pushed back against the onslaught of noise, so too did the monster. Laura felt the bone-deep weariness of the creature, its exhaustion from resisting the heavy, heavy sound. What are you? She thought. The voices around her only whispered louder. Then, just beyond the oppressing noise, there was another voice. No, no! Let her go! She heard Finn's cries muffled through the inky nothingness. Then the swirling storm and the creature in it rippled once, twice, and the void shattered. Laura woke to find she was sprawled out on the ground, Finn above her, struggling with a large figure in the dark. He seemed to be losing the struggle. Laura's sluggish mind was trying frantically to make a plan of action when she became aware of a strange tingling in her toes. The feeling traveled up her legs and into her spine, making her whole body go numb. Suddenly, the hulking shape on top of Finn began to unravel. Where once there was a solid dark mass, Laura watched as wisps of smoke dissipated before her eyes. The tingling reached her head, and her eyelids grew impossibly heavy. In the last seconds before losing consciousness, Laura could have sworn that she saw dark veins weaving their way under her husband's skin. Lorelei? Finn was shaking her, his voice panicked. Her eyes fluttered open. She tried to sit up. Pain blossomed from her left wrist. She moaned and clutched it to her chest. Thank goodness. He was wrapping her in his arms now, both of them seated on the muddy ground. I was really worried. She looked up at him, seeing 3 angry red gashes along his left arm. It hurt you, she said lamely. Her head ached terribly. It was a bear, he grimaced. It tried to get you. I didn't know what else to do. The baby. He gestured at her abdomen, tears in the corner of his eyes. She's okay, Lorelei reassured him as he helped her to her feet. She leaned against Finn, worried her knees might buckle. Flashes of a dark thing, curdled smoke, and the smell of spoiled meat swam across her mind's eye. She? Asked Finn, as he gently cradled her to his right side and began walking them out of the woods towards the house. Laura didn't register his question. It was a bear? She asked, as she gingerly placed one foot in front of the other. It's gone. His tone was firm. She just nodded in response. The night is really dark now. No more moonlight, he mused. And indeed, the woods around them were shades of gray, the moon now hidden behind fresh clouds. We ought to get back before we have another run-in with a wild animal. You need to go to a doctor, she exclaimed frantically, pushing away from him. Some part of her wondered if she was in shock. He grabbed her arm and gently pulled her back to his side. It's just a couple scratches. It's not as bad as it looks. His voice was confident and steady. Too drained to argue, Lorelei let Finn lead her back to the house and lock the heavy wooden door behind them. Over the course of the night, Lorelei's feeling of dread intensified. Despite her bone-deep weariness, she remained unable to close her eyes. The attack played over and over in her mind. A bear, she thought? That wasn't a bear. The smell of spoiled meat and the sound of buzzing voices haunted her as she tossed and turned against the mattress. Finn, for his part, slept like the dead, unaware of Lorelei's restlessness. He didn't awake until the rays of the sun fully peeked through the battered curtains. Rubbing the sleep from his eyes, he was greeted with the sight of Lorelei packing their few belongings into their single suitcase. A hurried breakfast later, they were strapped into his old blue Ford Bronco on their way back to California. "I don't understand it, Lore," Finn said as he eased the truck down the dirt driveway, signaling left toward the paved road that would take him back to the highway. "You've been talking about nothing but this house for months. Are you sure you'll be happy staying in California?" She stared out the window as the copper spires vanished among the pines. "I just think the timing isn't right, and you made a good point about the school system out here. It's dismal." She deliberately didn't look at the dark red streaks on his forearm, scabs already forming around the edges, erasing the wounds as if they never even existed. Last night she had had nightmares for the first time since childhood. Nightmares about the dark woods with a dark creature within them. A creature made of smoke and shadow and suffering. A creature that smelled of rot and mildew. A creature that wanted her to save it. She talked over the bear incident with Finn repeatedly in the following months. He swore up and down that it wasn't as big a deal as she made it out to be. The doctor declared his scratches to be shallow. He chuckled at Finn's account of the bear attack, dismissing Lorelei's worries. "These things happened," he said. "She had fainted," he said. "That was all there was to it," he said. It must have been so scary for her in the moment, but the bear was gone and Finn's arm had healed. Everything was fine now. She was overreacting, he said. Yet the nightmares continued. All summer long, Laura woke in her bed covered in sweat as if she had been running in her sleep. Despite this, the baby inside her grew until one early fall evening it was time. The usual September winds howled outside the window of her hospital room, forcing the faint smell of smoke into the sterile air. Fire season was in full swing in Southern California, and the smoke outside the window painted the sky orange in anticipation of the coming autumn. From behind the thin curtain separating the hospital room into two, Lorelei began to scream. The baby was a month late. Lorelei had walked back and forth, up and down every hall in the fancy state-of-the-art hospital, yet the child still did not want to come. An exhausting 30 hours passed in that fashion before finally, in that strangely quiet hour before dawn, when the darkest part of the night has passed but the sun is nowhere to be found, her daughter came screaming into the world. The nurse cleaned up the baby and then lay her upon her mother's chest. They considered each other, mother and daughter, both panting with exhaustion. As Lorelei locked eyes with that tiny elfin creature for the first time, she knew. She knew she would die before she let this perfect human go anywhere near those strange, dark woods, or that old house and its secrets. She made up her mind right then and there to never, ever think of the house in the woods again.